June 15, 1813. Trujillo, Venezuela. Simón Bolívar sits at a wooden desk inside a captured colonial building and signs his name beneath a single proclamation. The document has a name that survives him to this day: the Decree of War to the Death. By this point, Bolívar has already retaken Caracas once, only to lose it again. He is 30 years old, and he has concluded that half measures have failed against an empire that shows no restraint of its own. The decree he signs promises no mercy to any Spaniard who does not actively support independence, and safety to any American who does not actively oppose it. On paper, it reads as strategy. In practice, the line between soldier and civilian dissolves almost immediately. Historians still argue over the exact death toll that followed, but Spanish colonists were rounded up and executed in groups in the months after, some without trial, on the authority of a single signature. Bolívar would later describe it as a necessary evil, the price of forcing an empire that refused to negotiate to finally feel the war it had started. 2 years earlier, in 1811, a different side of Bolívar had already shown itself. Venezuela's first republic collapsed under Spanish reconquest, and Bolívar, then a junior officer, argued that the fortress of Puerto Cabello had fallen through the weakness of its commander. The commander was court-martialed. It was an early pattern that would repeat across his career. Setbacks were rarely his own failure, and the men beneath him paid for them. That pattern hardens by 1817. On October 16th of that year, in the city of Angostura, a court-martial convenes to try General Manuel Piar, a mixed-race officer who had helped win some of the Republic's most important victories, including the decisive battle for Guaira. Piar is accused of desertion and of inciting racial division among the troops, a charge historians still debate, since much of his actual offense appears to have been challenging Bolívar's authority as supreme commander. The verdict is death. Bolívar signs the order himself, and at dawn Piar is executed by firing squad in the town plaza. Word spreads through the officer corps within days. What nobody says aloud is that the Republic's most capable black and mixed-race general has just been removed by the man who claims to be leading a war for equality among all races. That claim of equality carries its own quiet debt. In 1816, the Haitian President Alexandre Pétion had given Bolívar ships, weapons, and printing presses to relaunch the independence campaign, on one condition: that Bolívar commit to abolishing slavery across the territories he liberated. Bolívar agreed, and did free slaves who joined his army as soldiers. But full abolition across Gran Colombia would not arrive in his lifetime. The laws that finally passed were laws of gradual freedom, freeing children born to enslaved mothers while leaving their parents in bondage for years to come, a compromise Bolívar signed off on rather than the immediate emancipation he had once promised Pétion in exchange for a fleet. The war to the death did not end with the 1813 decree. It continued as policy for years afterward, and its darkest chapter arrives in February of 1814, in the town of La Guaira, where Bolívar orders the execution of more than 800 Spanish prisoners of war, men who had already surrendered and were being held under guard. The order comes as royalist forces close in, and Bolívar concludes the prisoners cannot be evacuated and cannot be left free to rejoin the enemy. Some of his own officers later call it the single darkest order of the entire war, a mass killing of men who no longer posed an active threat on any battlefield. By 1819, Bolívar has united Venezuela and New Granada into a single republic, and by 1828 he governs a nation stretching from Panama to Bolivia. But the presidency he holds no longer resembles the one the revolution promised. 2 years earlier, in 1826, he had drafted a constitution for the new nation of Bolivia that named a president for life, with the power to name his own successor, a document his own allies compared openly to a monarchy in republican dress. In August of 1828, in Bogotá, he goes further still, assuming dictatorial powers over Gran Colombia, suspending the constitution he once helped write and ruling by decree. He has grown convinced, and says so in his own letters, that the people of the continent are not yet ready to govern themselves, that only a strong central hand can hold the new nations together. Political rivals call it exactly what it looks like: one general trading a crown of Spain for a different kind of throne. The backlash arrives on the night of September 25, 1828, inside the presidential palace in Bogotá. A group of conspirators, several of them former allies from his own war, storm the building intending to kill him in his bed. Bolívar escapes through a window, reportedly with the help of Manuela signs, and hides beneath a nearby bridge until the danger passes. He survives the night. What follows does not resemble mercy. Dozens of suspected conspirators are arrested across the city. Several are executed by firing squad within weeks. Francisco de Paula Santander, once his own vice president and by then his most prominent political rival, is sentenced to death for alleged involvement in the plot. A sentence Bolívar commutes only to permanent exile, not out of forgiveness by most accounts, but because executing a former vice president risked turning a rival into a martyr the Republic could not afford. By the final years of his rule, the man celebrated across a continent as its liberator is being denounced in the same cities he once freed, as a tyrant in uniform. Newspapers in Bogotá openly call for his removal from power. The very congresses he once convened to legitimize his rule increasingly reject him outright. In 1830, worn down by tuberculosis and by a union of nations he could no longer hold together, Bolívar resigns the presidency of Gran Colombia for the final time. Within months, the republic he built by decree, by court-martial, and by firing squad splits apart into three separate countries: Venezuela, Ecuador, and New Granada. He dies that same year, on December 17, 1830, near Santa Marta, reportedly stripped of much of his fortune, distrusted by many of the men he once commanded, and further from the unity he preached than on the day he began. The history taught in classrooms across the continent remembers the general who crossed the Andes in winter, who freed 6 nations from an empire, whose name now marks a country, a currency, and a mountain range of monuments. What it leaves out more quietly is the decree that authorized killing without trial, the general executed on his own signature, the slavery promise that outlived the man who made it, the constitution he suspended in his own name, and the friends who once fought beside him and later tried to kill him in return. Which raises a question no monument in South America has ever answered. How many of the 6 republics he freed ever fully forgave him for how he ruled them?